Dan Dickau here for Gonzaga Nation SI, the Gonzaga Nation Media Network. Well, today is one of the greatest days in all of sports. If you're a college basketball fan, this day has been circled on your calendar pretty much since the start of the season because it is Selection Sunday, Sunday, March 12th, where at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern, the tournament field will be revealed. It should be an exciting time, a fun time, an interesting time if you're a Gonzaga fan, because there's not the mystery or the knowingness that you are a one seed and trying to figure out, maybe are we the overall number one? What does our path look like? It's more of an exciting time this year, I think, because Gonzaga has really kind of fought through a lot of challenges throughout this season. You had an incredibly difficult non-conference. You had a really good opponent in the WCC in St. Mary's, where you shared the league title with. You had your 75 game home winning streak broken by an upstart LMU team, and you had a lot of outsider perceptions, thinking that there was disappointment around this Gonzaga program, where on the flip side, I honestly think this Gonzaga team was overrated coming into the season. And they took a couple of those losses. They learned from them. The staff re-implemented many philosophies. They cleaned up a lot of miscues on the defensive end. They figured out exactly how they want to play on the offensive end of the floor, and they gelled there. And now you're looking at a team that I think is a 2 seed. More than likely, they will probably get a 3 seed from the tournament committee. But I think being a 2 or a 3, it doesn't really matter too much. You're not a 1 in coming into the tournament with all of the pressure and the hype of being a 1 seed. So that takes a little bit of a pressure off their shoulders. But being a 2 or a 3 really doesn't matter, because you look at a 2 seed in the second round will play a 7 or a 10. A 3 seed will play or a 6 or 11. So with that being said, you're going to play, if you win your first round game, which I anticipate Gonzaga to do, you will have a difficult game. Whether you're playing a 6, 7, 10, or 11, you're going to be playing against a good team. You're either going to be playing against the kind of a middle of the pack Power 5 conference team, or you will be playing against a conference champion who probably was undervalued, underseeded, and won their first round game. That's typically what one of those seeds would be as. So with the selection show being this afternoon, wanted to get a little bit ahead of it, show and share my 4 predictions for who I think the overall number 1 seeds are. Why I think Gonzaga should be a 2, even though I don't think it matters a whole lot if it's a 2 or a 3. And then talk about potentially where they could be. So to me, the 4 number 1 seeds, regardless of how today plays out with Alabama, I think Alabama is a 1 seed. I think Houston, regardless of how today plays out in the American Championship game, is a 1 seed. Now they got Marcus Sasser went down with injury. I haven't heard yet this morning if he will play, but I think they're a 1 seed regardless. Kansas, to me, is a 1 seed, and UCLA, even though they lost to Arizona in the Pac-12 conference tournament title game last night, to me, UCLA is a 1 seed. But I don't think they're as strong a 1 seed as they could have been with Jalen Clark being out with injury. So NCAA tournament committee doesn't always look at injuries and who won't be playing. But if they look at everything the way that I have read and articles have shown, and they want to have focused on, they should be the 1 seed over Arizona. Kansas, to me, they're a 1 seed, even though they're ranked. They were beat by Texas in the Big 12 title game. They've got a number of losses, but when you look at their schedule, it's unbelievable. A lot of teams hope to get quad 1 opportunities. Well, of 30 plus games, 24 games for Kansas were quad 1 games. And in those, they were 17-7. So they're battle tested. They'll be ready to go. UCLA in those same quad 1 opportunities were 8-5. For Gonzaga, they're sitting at the net. They're sitting at 6. In quad 1 games, they were 6-4, and in quad 2, they were perfect 5-0. So that being their net being that high, the fact that they have a winning record in quad 1 games with limited opportunities is why I have them as a 2 seed. There's other teams that could be talked about. UConn being one, Marquette being one, Tennessee, Texas, all teams that are kind of talked about it on that two line, 3-line bubble. To me, and I know you're not supposed to use the eye test. The selection committee has said they don't use the eye test. But if you were to use the eye test, I don't see how Gonzaga would not be a 2. So when you just look at the analytics, I think their quad 1 wins are good enough. Their strength of schedule is good enough. The fact that they've won, pretty much every game in the last 7 weeks. I think it's a 10-game winning streak, 11-game winning streak going in to the NCAA tournament. It's a team that, to me, is peaking at the right time of the year. But again, the selection committee doesn't necessarily use that eye test and use the term peaking at the right time. They have a sheet that they look through, and many of the factors that we as fans and analysts would look at isn't always what the selection committee looks at. But that being said, I think Gonzaga is a 2 seed, but it really doesn't matter much if they are a 2 or a 3 seed. Now, what matters most is 2 things: the region that they're in, and then the location that their first round games are in, what's called their pods. So we'll first talk about the pods. I think it's important that Gonzaga is as close to Spokane as possible. And those closest to pod opportunities would be in Sacramento or Denver. And for reasons that are obvious, their fans can easily travel to those locations, as opposed to if they got shipped to Birmingham or Des Moines, Iowa, Orlando, Florida, Albany, New York, Greensboro, North Carolina, Columbus, Ohio. Those are where the other 6 pods are. But Sacramento, if UCLA is a 1 seed, I would imagine they're there. I would imagine if Arizona stays as a possible 2 seed, they might be in Sacramento as well. But then the fact is you could drive to Sacramento from Spokane or anywhere in the Northwest pretty easily. Denver, it's still drivable as long as you've got enough time to prep and plan. Flights are easy into and out of each of those cities. But I think, Sacramento would be preferable, but I don't think they're going to be there based on looking at a number of different bracketologists this weekend. The more that I look at, the more I'm seeing that Denver is the probable destination. But again, it doesn't matter as much as the region that they're in, because Gonzaga's 7th straight Sweet 16. I think they've got a legitimate opportunity to move into their 8th consecutive. And for Gonzaga and their fan base, I think it would be great if they were in the West region. Now, you could be in a pod in Sacramento or Denver, but be in a region that's not in the West. NCAA has tried to do that as best they can over the last few years, is to keep the initial first 2 games close enough. That's why I think Gonzaga will be Sacramento or Denver, as opposed to being shipped to one of those places a little further east. But crazier things have happened. Gonzaga's played all over the country in the first rounds in years past, but because they've been so dominant and because they've been so good over the last 7, 8, 10 years, Gonzaga fans have gotten spoiled because they've been in Portland, they've been in Boise, they've been in San Diego, they've been in places that are easy to get to. So we'll see where that pod is, and we'll see what the seed is. But again, I think it's most important, or would be most beneficial, is if Gonzaga were in the West region and then they were able to advance to that Sweet 16. The reason being, the West region regional finals are played in Las Vegas this year. So Gonzaga's played in Vegas many times over the years. This is the first time that the regional finals have been in Las Vegas, but it's a quick, easy trip from pretty much any place on the West Coast to get there. I can only imagine there would be a huge contingent of Gonzaga fans. The other regional finals in these would be the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight games, which are the opportunity to win and advance to the Final Four. Those would be in New York City, Kansas City, as well as Louisville. So obviously there's a big draw to being in the West region. So as it sits now, it's not even noon on the West Coast. We've got 4 or 5 hours left before the selection show. I will be back breaking down Gonzaga's first round opponent, breaking down Gonzaga's possible second round opponent, as well as the region bracket that they're in, and giving some overall thoughts to the NCAA tournament later today. So lots of good stuff coming from Gonzaga Nation SI, both on the show and the podcast side, as well as with our journalists, Henry Kruger and Cole Forsman. So check us out on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. Check us out. Leave us a comment, leave us a question. We'll do our best to get back to you. So one of the greatest days in sports is upon us. Can't wait to find out where Gonzaga plays and who in the first round of the NCAA tournament.